Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, good morning. It is 10 o'clock here in the morning. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio, worldwide epidemic of child abuse and human rights abuses. And we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And I'm glad to be able to do these shows. I haven't been able to do quite a few of my weekend shows and evening shows lately. I've been so busy, but I really wanted to do a show today, and I have some spare time. So, glad to be here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. You know, I have a lot of people listening to my shows. I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And this Saturday show, I just like to do this show to talk about the worldwide issues, going on around the world. I was mainly interested in international community development and child rights, international, looking at the international situation around the world. But more focused actually lately on, local kind of domestic, national, like North American issues. But worldwide, I mean, this is a huge issue. It always has been. It always will be. And I've always never liked it. I've always been able to feel like I could speak out against this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, we all have to be a voice, and we all have to stand up for what we feel is right, and we all have to speak out against what we feel is wrong. And there's always been people throughout history that are willing to stand up for human rights and stand up for child rights. And, thankfully, right? Because, honestly, we need everybody doing this. It's unfortunate that, there isn't that we can't get to these people. We can't get to these children, especially. Children are innocent and they're stuck in the middle of this mess. And this, I like to focus on the sort of international issues on Saturdays. So this is why I'm doing this show. But you have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about very sensitive material, and you have to know what's good for you to listen to and what what might bother you or cause you to be upset or whatever. And you have to know what's good for you to listen to. So listen at your own discretion to all of my shows. And if you're under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my show, because ultimately it's about, stopping child abuse and promoting human rights abuses, prevention and whatnot. But you need to keep yourself safe when you're online, and I like to promote that. So if you're under the age of 18, have somebody listen to the show with you who's older, who can help you make a decision whether you should be listening, especially to my other shows, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us, because I'm talking about abuse, mainly abuse on those shows. Actually, all of it's about abuse, and there's a whole lot of adult content on there. So I just think, and for mature listeners. So I think it's not for children. And if you're young, you make sure that you have someone listen to the show with you who can help you make a decision whether or not you should be listening. Right? This is really ultimately for your safety and your protection. Right? Very important that you keep yourself safe when you're online. So thanks everybody for being here. I did pop the link into the chat room what I want to talk about today, and I have a good friend Bill Murray here with me today. And hello, Bill. I hope everything's going well with you. And I have been so busy, I've only been able to catch a few of your shows, but they're always awesome, and I love being there with you and being able to share in that show. That's a great show for everybody. If everybody doesn't know that, Bill Murray, Stop Child Abuse, can Stop Child Abuse now, and that's blogtalkradio.com/Bill, BILL hyphen Murray, MURRAY. So hello, Bill. And today I want to look at an article from CRIN, that's the Child Rights Information Network, CRIN, CRIN. And that's http://crin.org. And this particular article is talking about Syria, tortured and killed Hamza al-Khatib 13. And this was posted June the 1st. And Al Jazeera.net, that's who actually released this news release. And Al Jazeera. And this is really sad. We know there's a lot of problems going on over there in Syria and Libya right now. And just looking at the news, you see these reports coming, lots of human rights abuses happening over there right now. There always has been, and that's, there always has been around the world. North America has its own issues of human rights abuses. I mean, this is just going on everywhere. And because there will always be somebody who's doing something that to take away the human dignity and human rights of somebody else, even their lives, their very lives, right? So this particular article is really disturbing. And, when I was reading this, it's just so sad. Like, it's not right. It'll never be right. And I don't care what anybody says. I will speak out against this stuff as long as I'm living and breathing on the planet. This is horrific, and no child should ever have to go through this. And not even an adult should have to ever go through this. Adults don't like to be abused either. You can imagine an adult would definitely complain about being mistreated. So you can think about a child who has absolutely no rights and no protection, and in many of these countries, no help, no recourse, no laws, nothing in place to protect these children's rights, right? But so there's nothing in place to protect any human rights in many countries, and so it's just discouraging to see this sort of thing, but it's still going on, and it will continue to go on until people change their hearts and change their minds about the way that they're going to treat people. It's absolutely horrific. This summary, the mutilation and death in custody of a 13-year-old child, has sparked further fury protests in the Syrian city of Dara, and this was May 31st, 2011. Hamza al-Khatib used to love it when the rains came to a small corner of southern Syria, filling up the farmers' irrigation channels enough so that he and the other children could jump in and swim. But the drought of the last few years had left the 13-year-old without the fun of his favorite pool. Instead, he'd taken to raising homing pigeons, standing on the roof of his family's simple breeze block home, craning his neck back to see the birds circling above the wide horizon of fields where wheat and tomatoes were grown from the tough, scrubby soils. Though not from a wealthy family himself, Hamza was always aware of others less fortunate than himself, said a cousin who spoke to Al Jazeera. He would often ask his parents for money to give to the poor. I remember once he wanted to give someone 100 Syrian pounds, which is like $2, and his family said it was too much. But Hamza said, "I have a bed and food while that guy has nothing." And so he persuaded his parents to give the poor man the 100. And in the hands of President Bashar al-Assad's security forces, however, Hamza found no such compassion. His humanity degraded to nothing more than a lump of flesh to beat, burn, torture, and defile until the screaming stopped at last. This is very, very disturbing. Arrested during a protest in Saida, 10 kilometers east of Dara, on April 29th, Hamza's body was returned to his family on Tuesday, the 24th of May, horribly mutilated. This is disturbing. The child had spent nearly a month in the custody of Syrian security, and when they finally returned his corpse, it bore the scars of brutal torture, lacerations, bruises, and burns to his feet, elbows, face, and knees, consistent with the use of electric shock devices and of being whipped with a cable. Both techniques of torture documented by Human Rights Watch as being used in Syrian prisons during the bloody 3-month crackdown on protesters. Hamza's eyes were swollen and black, and there were identical bullet wounds where he had apparently been shot through both arms, the bullets tearing a hole in his sides and lodging in his belly. On Hamza's chest was a deep black burn mark, his neck was broken, and his penis cut off. And where are the human rights committees? Where is the International Criminal Court? Asked the voice of the man inspecting Hamza's body on a videotape uploaded to YouTube. A month had passed by with his family not knowing where he was or if or when he would be released. He was released to his family as a corpse. Upon examining his body, the signs of torture are very clear. The original clip has since been removed, but a version with Hamza's castrated genitals blurred is still running. It's a graphic video, they said here. When Hamza's mother came to see the body, she was only shown his face, said the cousin, who was present at the time. We tried to tell the father not to look, but he pulled the blanket back. When he saw Hamza's body, he fainted. People ran to help him, and some started filming. It was chaos. He just disappeared. April 29th was dubbed the Friday of ending the siege and on Dara, the border city where the torture of children had lit the spark for the Syrian uprising, and where Maher al-Assad's forces led the assault on a civilian population that killed hundreds. And Hamza didn't burn for politics, said his cousin, but everybody seemed to be going to the protests, so he went along as well, walking with friends and family the 12 kilometers along the road from his hometown of Jiza, northwest to Saida. The firing began almost as soon as the villagers reached the edge of Saida, said the cousin. And people were killed and wounded. Some were arrested. It was chaotic. We didn't know at that point what had happened to Hamza. He just disappeared. A second source from the region, an activist also spoke to Al Jazeera, confirming that Hamza had been among 51 protesters detained on April 29th, he said, by Air Force intelligence, with a number of detainees having reported as using brutal torture. They were all arrested by the anti-terrorism branch of the Air Force intelligence, said the activist. They were all alive when they went into prison, but we received 13 bodies back this week, and all had been tortured. The Air Force intelligence are notorious for torture. They're barbarians. We're expecting another dozen bodies back in the coming days. Responding to the videos of Hamza's mutilated body, Syria's only private TV station, the pro-regime Al Dunia, aired an interview, Arabic, with a forensic doctor from Damascus, Tishreen Military Hospital, and Dr. Akram al-Shar, who claimed to have supervised the autopsy of Hamza in Tishreen, said he found no signs of torture, claiming the marks on Hamza's body had been caused by natural decomposition. And Dr. Shar's testimony, however, is also the first public admission by a Syrian official that civilians arrested or injured or killed during the military assault on the Deraa region have been collected and transported to security facilities in Damascus. And earlier this month, the Damascus Center for Human Rights Studies, the DCHRS, reported that the bodies of 244 civilians killed in the military assault on Deraa have been transported to Tishreen Military Hospital, consistent with an apparent systematic regime campaign first reported by Al Jazeera to disrupt the treatment of dead and dying protesters. After Hamza's body was filmed so the world could see how he died, the boy was buried in Giza after last prayers for his soul in the local mosque. And following the ceremony, children walked through the streets of Giza holding up a photo of Hamza and a banner that said he died a martyr, 13 years old under the brutal torture of the security forces. 13 years old, this boy. This is absolutely sick and twisted. It's ridiculous. And, I can't believe, it boggles my mind that this is going on here today, 2011. Like, what is going on? This is so barbaric and so twisted. You know what I mean? Like, this should not be happening. No 13-year-old child, boy or girl, no child ever, I don't care what their age, deserves to be treated like that. Can you imagine an adult being treated like that? An adult would not want to be treated like that. And people would cry out, look how they're treating that man, or look how they're treating that woman, and here's a child, a 13-year-old boy, who, was just walking along with his family to go see what was going on with this protest. And people say, well, why do they do that? They should stay away. Well, because they're not safe their countries are not safe. Like it's not like they're going to be safe in front of their house. You know what I mean? There is no safety and security in those countries. And so, sure, I mean, they should stay away from that stuff. And you would hope that people would, especially to encourage the young people to stay away from that stuff. The adults make their own decisions when going to those, protests and whatnot. But, children shouldn't be going around that stuff, and that's very true. But still, it doesn't matter. Why can't a person go and be walking down the road to go see what's going on? Why should that be illegal? And why should they have rounded this 13-year-old boy along with the other protesters? And because that government wants to keep their thumb on the people and oppress those people, and that's exactly how you do it. You torture, you maim, you kill, and you send the bodies back tortured, and you let the public know that if you're a government that's oppressing the people, that's what's going to happen to you should you decide to speak out. And that's the whole issue with this whole with what's going on around the world. See, I live in North America. I live in Canada, and I was born in the United States, and I grew up abused, and my rights were not recognized. But the issue is that was my parents' fault, and society here is pretty good for the most part. I mean, we have problems. We have lots of problems. But the thing is that we have human rights here. And, we still have issues with human rights abuses. I mean, it's still going on, you know what I mean? But yet there's watchdogs all over the place. And we have freedom of speech. We have the right to speak out against what we think is wrong. And we have the right to address, the public and address the government. And, have our voices heard, on a certain level. You know what I mean? We're still working on it. But the thing is, we have it so much better than these other people in these other countries. I wouldn't want to be in Syria right now. I wouldn't want to be in Syria ever. You know what I mean? It's a real problem. It's a country that's full of all kinds of terrorist, type regimes and activities going on, and the government is corrupt, and I wouldn't want to live anywhere over there. You know what I mean? I'm so thankful to be here, and I tell you, it's really sad because I feel so bad for those people that are over there. And what are we going to do? You know what I mean? What? Well, we can certainly at least recognize the situations and, become aware of the situation, because ignorance is not bliss and ignorance is the problem. And this is why this whole situation keeps going on around the world, since time began. Is because people like to close their eyes. They don't want to see it. They don't want to know about it. And yet, we have a 13-year-old boy who's been tortured and mutilated, and his body shipped back to his parents, completely annihilated. And I mean, this is a human soul. This is a human life. And, it's absolutely horrific. And, it's just not right at all. And yeah, Billy, sure, if you want to call in, please do. Please feel free. And that'd be great. Yeah, I don't usually take calls on my shows, but that's just because nobody usually phones in. But I don't mind having people on the show, absolutely. And I like talking to you, Bill, so if you'd like to phone in, please do. And so they said here, all foreign media are barred from Syria, but experienced local journalists and human rights researchers found no reason to doubt the authenticity of the footage of Hamza. And so it's very sad. A crime against humanity. Hamza's father, Ali Al-Khatib, wanted to press charges against the army and security forces, said Hamza's cousin. Instead, Ali and his wife were visited by the secret police and threatened. You know that. They're not going to allow that. You know what I mean? They're not going to allow any kind of any kind of voices to come up against what they're doing. They'll just snuff those people out too. They'll kill their whole family. They'll probably kill half of the village just because of that. Those people are absolutely deadly, and this is very, very sad that people have to live under this kind of tyranny and this kind of threat all the time. I can't imagine. I grew up in a home where this kind of reminds me of my home. We were not allowed to speak out. We weren't allowed to say anything. It's kind of like, so I do in a way understand what these people are going through, except for the government was my parents. These twisted tyrannical governments that people cry out about, being the human rights abuses. I mean, my parents were the twisted tyrannical government in the home, and they were inflicting their own torture and abuse on us, and we just had to put up with it and deal with it and learn how to roll with it. And, it's very, very sad. But see, I sort of understand, what these people are going through in a way. There's help over here where there isn't any help over there. You know what I mean? That's the issue. There's no help over there for these people. They said enough of what was happening because of you already. You know what would happen if we heard you had spoken to the media, said Hamza's mother, clearly terrified as she spoke to the local activist, refusing to give further details on the circumstances of her son's arrest or death. Because they'll be killed. The parents will be killed if they say anything. Hamza's father was briefly detained late Saturday afternoon, said his wife, after the secret police demanded he tell state media that Hamza was killed by armed Salafists, Sunni Muslim extremists, which the regime had claimed are driving the popular uprising. And the father was asked to go to the security branch for half an hour so they could tell him their point of view about Hamza, said the cousin. He was well treated. Torture in Syrian prisons, long known as some of the worst in the world, is now rampant, according to a report by Human Rights Watch, the HRW. And when you have mass execution and torture, it rises to the level of crime against humanity. You bet it is. And I think there needs to be something done here. It's the same thing that was going on in Africa, where the United States took a blind eye and just decided not to bother going in there and help those people. We're talking about huge crimes against humanity, and this is incredibly wrong. And they really do. I don't care. Lots of people say, "Oh, why do we have to get involved in their business?" Because these people are suffering and they need help. And this makes me sick. And that's exactly what freedom stands for. That's exactly what the United States stands for, and Canada. And that's why we're doing what we're doing around the world. People say, "Oh no, it's all oil driven." Well, some of it is. But some of it's not. You know what I mean? So there's been many cases where there's nothing in it for us except for to help out, right? This is just, it's just really sad. So I'm trying to get Bill Murray here. Hello, Bill.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I sure can. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I sure do love your shows, and I hope that a lot of people find the time to catch them. I'm unfortunately on an opposite schedule from you, but I love coming around and hearing you, and then sometimes joining you too.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yes, I'm glad that you could be here. Yeah, that's the thing. And lately I have been kind of missing a lot of my shows on the weekends and in the evenings, but probably in July. I think by July I should be getting back into the normal swing. But yeah, thanks, Bill. I appreciate that, and I love your shows too. And I know we are kind of on the opposite schedules and things. I try to catch your shows too, and half the time I can't be there. Sometimes I can catch the last part of your shows, but it's great to hear voices speaking out and and helping people. And I think that's what this is all about. I love Blog Talk Radio for that. It's a great way to to encourage people to use their voice and to become empowered to stand up for themselves and to stand up for their rights and stand up for other people's rights. That's great. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to spend too much time patting each other on the back, but I do, because I really do want you to be able to talk about this issue, and I certainly wanted to offer some perspective, of my own about this. That the horrors that are going on in the world are myriad. You can find them on every continent,
Oh yeah.
And certainly in every third world country.
Yeah.
And now we have a series of countries, that mostly in the Middle East, that are kind of having internal revolution and so forth. And so nobody's really in charge. I mean, there's various groups that are, and that's usually the genesis for the things like we saw in Africa that you just mentioned, for example. It was a massive conflict going on, and when the United States and Canada and England and some of the other countries that do get involved in human rights activities around the world are considering injecting themselves into these things. It's not always oil, but it is often an expenditure of our own, what we call treasure. Whether it's how much it costs to put the military in there, or how many American lives might be lost, or so forth. And there often is, of course, a profit motive that's part of the consideration. And I guess I understand that on one sense, but in another sense, it is kind of outrageous, but that we would allow these things to go on when it might be within our control to put our foot down somehow. And but it's also go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it could be a matter of influence too. They sanction certain countries. They do all kinds of stuff. The UN and then the world will the world. I want to say the compassionate world, the people that actually really do care, will quite often put some sanctions on these countries to make it a little bit hard. But that affects the average Joe. You know what I mean? That affects these children too, because then they're not getting what they need. As far as putting sanctions on things, it's a harsh situation. You know what I mean? Like, what's the answer? I know, because you can look at it both ways. I totally understand what you're saying. Like, you can see it in both lights. I understand why people say, oh, well, we have no business over there. No one, that's their business. And, because why should we get involved and lose our own sons and our own daughters and our own, finances put into this thing when we know what a mess it actually turns into with looking at Afghanistan and looking at the whole situation there and other places, where that's happened. But, it's just so discouraging, because you sit here and you think, oh my God, like this is people say, well, how many lives warrants that? What, there's 255 people that was picked up by this security force and taken and tortured. I mean,
I know.
Sad.
But if you look at it, for example, from the perspective of having lost roughly 3,000, mostly civilians, during the events of 9/11, we did go to war. And we went to war with two countries, one of which many people were really sure we shouldn't be at war with, which was Iraq. But in any case, we got involved with both Iraq and Afghanistan. And it took quite a while until our own casualties, equaled the number of people that we lost. In other words, 3,000. We've surpassed that, and we're approaching twice that number now. And we still can't figure out how to get ourselves out of the mire, 10 years later, and we're now approaching having lost twice that many, 5,000 or so soldiers and so forth on the ground in the conflict. So, but the point is that when you talk about treasure, the other side of this is that children are our treasure. It's not really the amount of money that it costs, and it's not really the number of soldiers that we lose. Soldiers take that job on knowing that they're going to be put in harm's way, or at least there's a good likelihood that they'll be put in harm's way. Children are completely innocent, and they're the future of the world, and they are the true treasure of a country. So for us to be arguing about one kind of treasure and not pay attention to the other, that 13-year-old, and the others in his circle are the treasure of Syria. And yet we have such a dysfunctional relationship with Syria and several other of the Arabian countries over there that we don't have any influence right now. I mean, we can't even decide like who's in charge right now.
No, exactly. Well, yeah, that's right, and that's it's a huge issue. And would we get involved anyway? I doubt it. And not, you know what I mean? Like, but the thing is I'm just thinking about this as as a world population, as a society. It's always bothered me that that we'll go in to help certain groups, around the world, and then there's these other groups that we just don't get involved for whatever reason, and the rest of the world is screaming out, going, well, how come you guys are helping those guys? But you're doing absolutely nothing to help these guys, and you did nothing to help them, and there was a slaughter. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, it's so incredibly sad. I mean,
it is sad.
and that, there's there's no easy answer. If there was, we wouldn't be having these problems. You know what I mean? It's just frustrating, and I think my main goal of this show is just get people thinking about this stuff and to realize that there are children who are caught up in this mess around the world, and who have no protection, no security, no safety, and they're really at the mercy of the situations over there, and they're caught in the middle of these wars, and it's absolutely horrific. Like I said, right, as of May 25th, there's 1,100 civilians killed in the government crackdown in Syria, and that's people would say, well, that's not that many, but to me, this is mothers and fathers, this is children, this and cousins and friends, and I mean these are people. These are people with with lives and they with dreams and living their lives, and this 1,100 people means something to me. You know what I mean? And I think that's what I'm trying to kind of get at is for people to not forget to stand up for human rights, and not to just forget that these human rights were paid for dearly. The human rights that we enjoy here in North America right now, that we're, you're in these States, I'm in Canada, and the freedoms that we have were not brought about by just because somebody thought, hey, let's have human rights. People lost their lives. Men and women died so that we could enjoy these rights here today. And if we don't stand up for them, and we don't speak out against human rights abuses and stand up for human rights, we'll lose them. The whole freedom of speech. I mean, it's not that impossible. It's not that far off. I hope people realize that things could change here too, and we have to we have to be I think it's just important to remember these people around the world that have no protection and no security, and that nobody will be stepping in to help them, and that in our own countries we have to fight to secure more human rights. We got to keep these human rights alive, and we actually have to push to secure them, because they're not secure. I mean, we have human rights abuses going on in the States and in Canada all the time, and people don't think of these as being human rights abuses, but they are. We're talking police brutalities, child sex trafficking, like any kind of sex trafficking, women or men, children, abuses, right? I mean, abuses from of all types are still going on, even though we have human rights over here. So but people don't think of it as that because they've put nice little cushy terms around them, such as domestic violence, child abuse, and whatnot. But this is human rights abuses, and this is absolutely, people have died to secure these rights for us, and we need to make sure that we stand up for them. So hopefully people will realize that, and realize that what's going on around the world, there's no way that these people in Syria are ever going to get any help. I mean, it's a sad reality.
It is. But I also want to report that I've seen more news stories lately, and it's pretty recent, but lately that come from, let's call them second world countries. We're talking about certain countries being third world countries because they're not very developed, but second world countries are at least partially developed, and maybe not leaders like the U.S. and Canada and Britain, but they're well developed. And I've seen stories from countries like Nepal and Armenia and Scotland recently, where they are reporting on at least they're paying attention to some of these abuses that you're talking about. Yeah. And that to me is a good sign. I mean, every country needs to be doing this, and I don't know that we're not hearing about some other good things that might be happening just because they're too far away for them to make it into our news stream. But right. But it's also another reason, Lori, that the arguments about what's going on in, for example, Guantanamo Bay and how we use torture or not with the prisoners there is an important issue because our own soldiers are then and our own citizens, or if they're caught behind the lines, so to speak, in some of these countries, are of course dealt with severely. Right. And if we are dealing severely with those that we capture, then they have an argument about, well, we're just doing what you do to us.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's a huge, huge problem, and it's kind of like, the what do they call that? The kettle calling calling the kettle black or whatever that is. Calling
the kettle black.
That's right. Like, it's the same thing. And that's the issue. It's like it's going to have to be a change of heart. It's going to have to be a change of the way people see people and the way people treat people. It's going to have to be a change of the heart, a change of the mind, and for this to really truly change. I don't know how anybody could torture and mutilate a child and cut their body parts off and send them back to the parents in a box or a bag. I don't know how anybody could do that and sleep at night, but people do these things, and it's absolutely horrific. There was so many articles. I mean, you could just go through them. I had another one based on Libya and the fact that they're using Viagra to give to the prison officials so that they can rape the inmates. This is absolutely horrific. It's just mind-boggling. It really is. And we can't cover it in one show, that's for sure. We have about 10 seconds left. But thanks a lot for being here, Bill.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for stopping in. It's great to talk to you. And you have a great weekend. And when is your show on?
Monday through Friday, 8 o'clock for 90 minutes, and then Sunday for 2 hours, 8 o'clock to Eastern Coast time.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna try to catch your show tomorrow night. I hope everybody will tune in. Bill Murray, that's a great show, everybody, and I do like to promote it just as well as Bill's promoting my stuff because it's for adult survivors of child abuse or adult survivors of abuse, and it's very, very helpful. There's people on there. It's all about recovery, and like you were saying, Bill, you're only as sick as your secrets, and so it's like it's a safe place where people can share and get some information and get some help, and then there's your website. That's NAASCA, the National Association for Adult Survivors of Child Abuse.org, right?
Right.
So
right.
I hope everybody who's listening to this show and my other shows will actually stop in there and pop in. I have been sharing the show because it's a great resource. I like to be there when I can, and this week's been incredibly busy. Now next week will be too, but in July it should all start to settle down, and I'll be able to hopefully make some more of your shows because I really enjoy sitting there. It's good for me too. It's good information. So yeah, appreciate it, Bill. You have a good weekend.
6 nights a week, we're kind of like an on-air, online recovery and community meeting that deals with these issues.
It's awesome. I know, and I love it, and I'm glad to be able to be a part of it when I can. And like this month has been incredibly busy. Last month, but I'm looking at hopefully in July I'll have a lot more time to just get back into the swing of things and hopefully be able to be in on some of the shows because it's very helpful for me as a survivor of abuse and like yourself, right? So it's good. It's good to be able to be that support and to be in just another place where people can get some help. So hopefully people will tune to that. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you again soon.